resume our board meeting. I believe we can take the rest of the items in sequential order on the agenda. We'll start with agenda item number 2. This was pulled at the request of Supervisor Vargas, and so I'd like to turn it to her for any comments she has on this, and I believe there are some staff available if there are questions. So Supervisor Vargas.
Before the supervisor begins, any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you. You will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. For item number 2, although I understand that today's actions proposed is to support living safe initiatives for 2025 for a strategic plan, and it's specific equipment for deputies to ensure their continued safety and the well-being of the public. I did want to make an amendment to recommendation, move to amend item number 2, recommendation number 1, and change the award of the contracts for up to 2 years and an additional 6 months if needed, so that we can really take a look at a deep dive into to the funding proposal.
All right, so we have and then we'll go to public speakers after this. I just wanted to make sure we got Supervisor Vargas's concern. And so basically, Supervisor Vargas, your motion would be to adopt the item with the change that instead of a 6-year with an additional 6 months if needed, it would be award the contract for up to 2 years with an additional 6 months if needed in recommendation 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Happy to second that motion. If it's okay with fellow board members, we have a motion in a second. Why don't we go to public comment? I want the public to know what we are voting on. We'll do public comment and then we'll come back to board member deliberation. So I'll ask the clerk to see if there's any requests to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I will note for the record that we received 19 e-comments on this item. We had 12 requests to speak on this item. I would ask that those individuals that requested to speak to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We're waiting for those callers to call in at this time. Don't see any of the callers at the moment, Mr. Chair.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, why don't we go to board member discussion, and then Mr. Clerk, just remind me before we vote, we circle back and see if any public speakers are there. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you very much. I understand the amendment to recommendation number 1. I'm just curious from staff if there's any negative ramifications from contracts that need to be longer than that or than 2.5 years, or if it's going to have any sort of a negative impact on any of the contracts that are being awarded here today. If we go to that 2.5 years versus 6.5 years.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. This is Helen. We have double checked with Public Safety Group, and they are aware of this amendment and willing to accept that. I believe the Assistant Sheriff Martinez may be on the line, and if that's the case, would you like to weigh in, Kelly?
I really want to know, will it cost us more to do that?
Thank you, Supervisor. The only, it may cost more. The 6-year contract allows us to keep the price the same. However, we're willing to work with that if that's what the supervisors want to do.
Well, in more, do you mean 10% more, 20% more?
We don't know. It just will depend on what the manufacturer wants to do. If we lock them in for 6 years, then the cost remains the same. If it's 2.5 year, we'll just have to renegotiate the cost. It could remain the same. It could go up. It could go down. We won't know.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Wasser-Reamer.
Hi, thank you so much. I would like to support the amendment from Vice Chair Vargas. I think it's a great idea. I'm just wondering from county staff if it would be possible to both take Vice Chair Vargas' approach of 2 years with, but also include from the outset a pricing schedule with sort of an options contract with a pricing schedule, so that we avoid the challenge that Supervisor Desmond identified with potential cost increases.
We may have to clarify a little bit that question or that suggestion, so they know exactly what we're asking
So, sorry, just to be clear, is that in negotiating that contract, that when we sign that contract for the length of time that Vice Chair Vargas suggested, that we also at the same time include an option element of that contract that allows us to sign a renewal at a pre-specified price so that we're not potentially subject to a big price increase if we wanted to, but again, not locking us in, because I support Vice Chair Vargas's amendment.
So would it be an option that would go longer than the 2-year period?
Yeah, if we wanted to exercise it, but optional on us if we wanted to exercise it.
Yeah, this is really up to the sheriff's departments are the ones doing this. So I don't know. I think if we wanted to get closer to the 6 years that they originally requested for, I don't know how technically we would do that. Is there someone on staff that can speak to that issue?
Chair Fletcher, Supervisor Lawson-Remer, this is David Smith, Acting County Counsel. Yes, we could negotiate out-year options, and they would require your board's concurrence prior to exercising the option, but it would be possible to do that, and probably could come up with a methodology that would allow for some favorable pricing for volume discounts if those options were exercised.
Okay.
Great.
Would ask the maker of the motion if she would entertain that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. So we have a motion by Supervisor Vargas, seconded by myself, to adopt the recommendations in agenda item 2 with the change where it reads award contract for up to 6 years, an additional 6 months if needed, to now read award contract for up to 2 years and an additional 6 months as needed, including the option to extend beyond this length of time if advantageous via pricing. Any other questions? Motion and a second. I would ask the clerk. First, let's see if we have any public comment.
Chair Fletcher, there are no individuals have called in.
Okay. Motion and a second. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Great, thank you. Supervisor Anderson.
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond.
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas.
Aye.
Chair Fletcher.
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We'll now move to agenda item 3, establish appropriations, adopt a resolution fiscal year 2020 as it relates to Operation Stone Garden grant. Again, Supervisor Vargas pulled this item. I'd like to go to her first to lay out her thoughts on this item, and then we will see if there's any public comments and have board deliberation.
1 second. There you go. Thank you, Chairman Fletcher. You know, as an advocate and champion of SB 54, the California Values Act, the state law that prevents state and local law enforcement agencies from using their resources on behalf of federal immigration enforcement agencies. And, you know, I really wanted to address concerns that needed to be clarified in order for me to support this grant program. I have heard from my community, and the concerns that they have that are being shared by many of them are some concerns that I had myself. It is clear to me now that these grant revenues support efforts to disrupt the flow of illegal narcotics, firearms, and currencies into the U.S. And, you know, as many people know, they have been disproportionately impacted my district and the people that I represent. And so, like many of my constituents and members of the community, I saw a lot of red flags, including sharing of information with law enforcement in an already over-policed area. And as you know, many members of my district and my community already have a lot of distrust over law enforcement. And so I wanted to be assured that the information was not going to be shared with federal agencies. And after thoroughly discussing this item, I am prepared to cautiously be supporting it with the understanding that it complies with SB 54. I will be monitoring, and my staff and my team will be monitoring and working closely with the sheriff to establish more specific metrics to better evaluate the efficiency of the program. I also will be following up and inquiring with the Biden administration and our congressional delegation to see if there are more effective alternatives to address border crime while protecting everyone's rights. I am going to be very honest with all of you, and my goal would be that you know, we end up actually eliminating this program after the end of this agreement. But for now, I am willing to support it after the discussions that we've had.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
Yeah, and that's the motion.
That is a motion. We have a motion by Supervisor Vargas. Is there a second to that motion?
Could I make a second and make a comment?
Of course.
Great, thank you so much. So I really want to thank Vice Chair Vargas for her leadership on this issue. I share her concerns, and you know, obviously complying with the California Values Act, Senate Bill 54 is very, very important. And I was also concerned and sent a memo to the sheriff with a series of questions a couple weeks ago when we first saw this in front of us. And I want to thank the Sheriff's Department for responding to the questions, which I do think clarified the limitations on the scope of the work supported by this grant, and that this funds cannot and will not be used to collaborate with ICE. So I like Vice Chair Vargas, I do feel more comfortable with this item now, but would like to support her in her efforts to continue monitoring this issue and to make sure that there are no actions taken by the county or the Sheriff's Department that inappropriately or unfairly target our immigrant community.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's see if there's any requests for public comment.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I'll note for the record that we received 47 e-comments on this item, and we have 9 requests to speak on this item. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You'll hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. You will then need to press *6 to unmute your phone. Each caller will be asked to state their name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. You'll hear this sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments at that time. Aaron, if you could please identify the first caller.
Yes, our first caller is 5288. 5288.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Rebecca Bewley. I'm a resident of District 1. I'm here to urge you to decline Operation Stone Garden funding. I want every resident of our community to be able to trust the police and sheriff's department, which they cannot do if they are fearful of them. The way that Operation Stone Garden targets our Latino and immigrant community members does not align with our public values. If some of the community is scared to report crimes due to ties with federal immigration enforcement agencies, we all become victims to a failed policing system. I urge the Board of Supervisors to focus on community safety for all and to decline Operation Stone Garden funding. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next caller is 2438. 2438.
Good afternoon. My name is Esmeralda Flores. I'm here on behalf of the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. San Diegans deserve to feel safe, welcome, and included in their communities. Operation Stone Garden is a program that provides funding to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies for collaborating with federal agencies at the border. This collaboration puts Operation Stone Garden at odds with our values of justice, inclusion, and welcoming immigrants. It has created fear and distrust of law enforcement in Latino and immigrant communities, as they have been disproportionately targeted and over-policed as part of Operation Stone Garden. In short, Operation Stone Garden has no place in our county, where immigrants make up more than 21% of our population. In the past, ACLU affiliates in California have received reports of local law enforcement agencies using Operation Stone Garden as a pretext to stop and detain people until immigration agents arrive to make the arrest. In other regions, law enforcement agencies have faced lawsuits for using Operation Stone Garden funds to illegally interrogate low-income Latinx people about their immigration status and to search homes for undocumented immigrants. San Diego County should follow the example of jurisdictions like Indio, California, and Pima, Arizona, which cut ties with Operation Stone Garden in recent years. These jurisdictions raise concerns about racial profiling, lack of oversight, and harm to relations with the Latinx community. There are also serious questions about whether participating in Operation Stone Garden violates SB 54, the California Values Act, a state law designed to protect communities against collaboration between local law enforcement and federal immigration agencies. We are calling on you, our Board of Supervisors, to reduce the presence of law enforcement in over-policed communities. Ending the county's participation in Operation Stone Garden is an immediate step. It's an immediate and important step this board can take to begin addressing bias policing. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next caller is 0463. 0463. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, my name is Margaret Baker, and I'm a resident of the South Bay for over 30 years and a proud constituent of Supervisor Vargas. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of South Bay People Power in strong opposition to the Operation Stone Garden grant. We urge the county to disentangle itself from all federal agencies and programs like Operation Stone Garden that racially profile Latino and immigrant members of our community. Operation Stone Garden lacks oversight and transparency and takes advantage of loopholes in laws such as SB 54 to lure local law enforcement with grants to collaborate in joint operations with agencies of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security that over-police, criminalize, and terrorize our community. As a volunteer with the San Diego Rapid Response Network, I have personally witnessed the terror and utter disregard for human life perpetuated by ICE and Border Patrol agents and other DHS agencies, specifically pointing guns at U.S. citizen children, spying on our neighbors, breaking down doors without presenting judicial warrants, arresting people without cause, and during the COVID pandemic, arresting people without the proper use of PPE, endangering our community and the local Chula Vista police officers with whom I watched them interact just blocks from my home. The types of DHS surveillance and raids that I have witnessed are not operations we want to be in partnership with in our community. Please stop the funding for this harmful program and let's work together to create communities that are truly safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 6917. 6917.
Hello, my name is Erin Cermoto Grassi, and I'm the Regional Policy Director at Alliance San Diego. On behalf of Alliance San Diego, I'm calling to urge the county to not accept the Operation Stone Garden funding. We are deeply concerned with the way that Operation Stone Garden undermines community trust. Operation Stone Garden funding is to improve overall border security, a job that is the statutory responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security, not local and state law enforcement agencies. As part of accepting funding for Operation Stone Garden, the San Diego Sheriff's Department collaborates with Border Patrol on certain joint operations. At a minimum, this violates the very spirit of the California Values Act, SB 54, and undermines community trust. At its worst, this collaboration has led to direct violations of SB 54 and the deportation of San Diego County residents. In 2018, the Sheriff's Department violated SB 54 by transferring 2 individuals to Border Patrol. This incident took place during an Operation Stone Garden activity when, according to Sheriff Gore, the Border Patrol self-deployed. Sheriff Gore will and has told you that Operation Stone Garden activities are permitted under SB 54, but the fact of the matter is he cannot control the actions of a rogue agency that does not care about the California Values Act. The SDSO's participation in Operation Stone Garden and collaboration with Border Patrol means that our county will always be at risk of having county resources used to deport community members and of violating state law. At the end of the day, the Sheriff Department's participation in Operation Stone Garden erodes community trust, puts all of our safety at risk, and does not align with the Board of Supervisors' vision for a more just and inclusive San Diego County. Alliance San Diego urges you to reject the Operation Stone Garden funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 9207. 9207.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a resident of District 1. I'm calling in to urge you to decline Operation Stone Garden funding. Operation Stone Garden disproportionately targets Latino and immigrant communities, creating fear and distrust of law enforcement. This makes communities less inclined to report crimes. And personally, as a trauma survivor, I can attest to the pain of feeling chronically unsafe. It's very disruptive to my life and my ability to have relationships and fulfill any of the goals I have for myself. And I know that this program would perpetuate that feeling for others in the community. And again, no one deserves to have that chronic feeling every day. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their bodies and in their communities. And that's why I again urge you to decline Operation Stone Garden. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is 7498. 7498. Seven 498 appears to have left the Zoom meeting. So that was our last public speaker on this item. So Chair Fletcher will let you know if that person rejoins the Zoom meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a motion by Vice Chair Vargas, a second by Supervisor Lawson-Remer. Any other board member comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
The motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 6, an ordinance amending the San Diego County Administrative Code related to the San Diego County General Relief Program. This is our first reading of this item. I will turn this over to staff for a presentation. Then we will go to public comment and then board member discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me introduce Rick Wani, who will be giving today's staff presentation.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. Today, we are here to request approval of 2 changes to the administrative code for the General Relief Program that will support recipients accessing necessary and critical benefits more quickly. Next slide. There are 2 specific actions requested from the board today regarding the General Relief Program. 1, allowing the General Relief applications to be submitted online. The current requirement is outdated and requires in-person application only, which creates additional barriers for customers. And 2, allowing liens to be collected within 30 days of approval of the GR aid. The current requirement is for the county to obtain this prior to the granting of the General Relief aid approval. During the COVID-19 response, HHSA has already implemented these changes temporarily. Because of the observed successes of these changes, we are recommending making these changes a permanent part of the program. General Relief is a mandated program per state law in the Welfare and Institutions Code, first established in 1933. Each of the 58 California counties is required to operate and maintain a local General Relief program. The General Relief program supports indigent and homeless county residents who are not eligible to other state and federal cash aid programs. The General Relief program follows the above eligibility criteria listed here on the slide. General Relief is a critical safety net program to serve the most vulnerable community members who are often homeless and not eligible for other cash assistance programs. General Relief is meant to be a temporary assistance program of last resort and is not intended to serve customers for an extended period of time. General Relief participants who are assessed to be disabled and unable to work are referred to the county's contractor to assist them in applying for Social Security benefits. These requested changes will increase opportunities for individuals to apply for the General Relief program. Allowing virtual applications for General Relief modernizes the program to be in alignment with other self-sufficiency benefits and increases the opportunity for homeless individuals to better gain access to the program. Allowing the execution of the lien to be retained within 30 days of the program approval versus prior to the grant being awarded will significantly reduce customer visits to the county family resource centers and ensures continuous program enrollment so long as eligibility exists and supports access to program benefits for eligible individuals. The requested changes before you today will enhance the customer service experience for our General Relief population, increase access to the program, as well as improve staff efficiency. Subject to your questions, this completes our presentation.
Thank you for that. I'll ask the clerk if there's any request for public comment on this item.
Mr. Chair, there are no requests to speak on this item.
Mr. Chair, let me add one other comment to make sure that all the board members understand that this program is locally funded. It is not state or federal funded dollars. This is general purpose revenue from your local revenue sources. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to make a motion on this item. I think we've seen a lot of things we've done in response to COVID. And I think the assessment of those when they have value and we think that they should be continued ongoing is a wise and appropriate exercise here. And I think accessing the availability of these funds in a more seamless way by adding the online application process, I think is a step forward to increasing the accessibility of county government and the availability of these. So I'm happy to make a motion to approve today's item. We'll now go to any other board member comments. I see Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair Fletcher. Yes. So I first of all want to just say I very much support the spirit of this ordinance, but I would like to offer an amendment to the ordinance before moving it forward. I certainly support the way this ordinance focuses on expanding access to general relief, but as structured currently, the measure does not expand help to some of the members of our community who need it the most. Currently, Section 265 of our county code limits general relief services to those who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents. And if we as a county are committed to a framework of the future that uplifts all communities, then we must also make sure that our investments are reaching the hands of those who are most in need. I would therefore propose to amend this item by requesting county staff come back to our next meeting with a report and assessment of what it would cost to delete Section 265 from our county code and amend our ordinance to allow access to general relief to undocumented residents. This is not only the humane and right thing to do morally and ethically, it is also sound economic policy to support our local economy, as the most vulnerable members of our society spend every dollar received to meet urgent needs, and this spending directly benefits our local businesses. Therefore, I put forward a motion to amend this item to ask county staff to come back with a report with an assessment regarding the cost and feasibility of deleting Code Section 265. Thank you very much.
Got it. Thank you, Supervisor Lawson-Remer. So it is, we're not, just so we're clear, we're not amending the ordinance. The ordinance will continue related to the online activities. What we're asking for is an additional recommendation directing staff to report back with an assessment of the cost that would be borne if there was an elimination of Section 265. Is that correct?
That is correct. To assess the cost of allowing undocumented residents to access general relief funds by deleting Section 265.
Okay. So the first reading of the ordinance on the table would move forward unaltered. There would be an additional request of staff independent of the ordinance to do an evaluation of the cost of eliminating Section 265 and bring that information back to the Board of Supervisors. Happy to accept that in the original motion if that's easier. And we'll count you as a second on that, if that is okay with you.
Great. And just to be clear, I'm asking if they can come back for our next board meeting. So I suppose we better ask if that's feasible for county staff.
CAO, how much time would be needed to do that analysis?
We could late docket something for the next meeting, but to have it in time for the regular docket would be nearly impossible because that would be Friday. So I would request to have it be on the first meeting in March or allow us to late docket an item right before the meeting in February. Thank you.
I'm very comfortable with a late docket because this is a request. It's an analysis and information that we can then decide whether or not to act on. So late docket would be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we may be able to do a late docket on this item. I think in general, if the late docket is truly for an emergency thing that was out of our control, where there's no ability to do that. Another option we could do that might be acceptable would just be a memo to the board offices that would provide that information, and I think that would probably fulfill the same function in the same time without having us get in conflict of the late docket item, if that's okay. Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
That's fine. A memo is fine by the next board meeting, but it can be a memo instead of a report to the board.
Does that work for our CAO?
That's even better. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, good. We got that fixed. Supervisor Vargas.
Yes, so I wanted to see if we can add a friendly amendment, or maybe it's just a request for that specific memo on trying to get additional information on the lien, right? The code, administrative code right now, I would like to see what would happen if we eliminated the lien requirement. There's a lot of individuals who are in dire need for support and simply don't see the necessity for the county to have this requirement, but I want to see what the impact would be on it. I know my understanding is that we haven't had any collections in the last 5 years, so maybe there's a reason why it's there or not, and would be interested in knowing a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that okay with the seconder of the motion if we add that to the memo coming back to the board?
Yes,
an analysis of the lien? Okay,
yes.
perfect. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the analysis for the, maybe I'm not hearing it correctly, the lead? Is that what it is?
Lien.
Okay, I don't know enough about that to make a judgment. Could I get a little more explanation on what is exactly being asked for?
Yeah, can we ask our county staff to walk Supervisor Desmond through the lien process as it relates to general relief?
Sure. Supervisor Desmond, currently in the general relief program, prior to granting aid to an applicant, the county executes a lien in the event in the future the applicant became in acquisition of property, and the lien agreement states that in that scenario, the individual would need to pay back the county for costs incurred while participating in the general relief program.
So, okay, so if they're participating, and how far out is it, I guess, is it 5 years? Or what is it to, what's the, I guess, the timeline if they buy a property? Or is it for the rest of their lives? I'm just curious how that works.
Supervisor Desmond, there is no time limit on the lien. It is for the remainder of their lifetime.
Okay, so if they get money and then they buy a property, we put a lien on their house, and then if and when they sell that house, that we get paid back. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, then I guess I'll ask Supervisor Vargas, then what is it you just want to see if that was eliminated, what those costs would be? Is that what you want part of the study?
Well, I think the people who usually ask for this relief are people who are in need. And so the fact that we're putting a lien on them, it just creates a greater barrier for them. So my request is to find out, do an analysis to see if is it necessary to create this lien, knowing that most of these folks may or may not have property, or the impact may be greater. So instead of actually helping people, we're continue to putting them in a difficult situation. And so I'm trying to find out, if we haven't actually been gathering any of these monies for the last 5 years, why is this code actually there if we haven't been enforcing it?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if it's just a report on that, that's fine. I think actually with the lien, we don't get our money back until they sell the house. Essentially, is the way I look at that. So, okay. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion by myself, a second by Supervisor Lawson-Remer to approve the first reading of the administrative ordinance with a secondary direction to staff to provide a memo to the board that outlines the potential cost associated with the elimination of Section 265, along with an analysis of the lien component of general relief programs. Any other board member questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item number 11, authorize competitive solicitations amendment to extend existing behavioral health service contracts. I believe we will have a presentation by Dr. Bergman. And so when he is ready, we will turn it over to him.
Well, Dr. Bergman is getting settled. Any members of the public that have requested to speak in this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you. You will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. The COVID pandemic's harmful effect on our community's mental health is well established. And while we continue to respond to the pandemic and its various impacts, it's critical that we maintain our bedrock behavioral health system, supported primarily through contracts between the Behavioral Health Services Department and community-based providers for those most in need across San Diego County. At the same time, and with acknowledgement of the geographically disparate harm of COVID on both the public health and economic well-being of county residents, it's especially critical that we make funding decisions in behavioral health that best address long-standing inequities in resource allocation and access to care. Today's recommendations will help us to achieve both ends. Most of the actions that we are recommending today fall into two categories: contract extensions and procurements. The heavy emphasis on extensions, which applies to around 80% of the contracts referred to in the board letter, is a departure from traditional procurement practices. We're doing this now in the midst of great economic turbulence, first to allow more time for our tax revenue-driven budget to become clear before making substantial long-duration commitments, but also so that we can continue building internal data and analytic infrastructure that's necessary in order for us to make the kinds of data-driven resource decisions that will ultimately advance our equity goals. Critical services impacted by today's action include outpatient treatment to address our community's mental health and substance use needs, outreach to homeless San Diegans, prevention and early intervention services, residential services and housing supports for those with behavioral health conditions, and services that will help alleviate the recent local hospital surge, as well as other critical areas listed on the slide displayed before you. Total costs associated with today's recommended actions are estimated to be between $175.2 and $183.3 million in fiscal year 21-22 and are included in the fiscal year 2022 adopted operational plan for the Health and Human Services Agency. There are a total of 7 recommended actions in front of you today. The contract extensions requested represent 30% of the total contract portfolio for behavioral health services and around 30% of total contracted dollars, just for scale. I'll briefly review the 7 recommended actions. Approval of recommendation number 1 authorizes competitive procurement for 21 contracts for behavioral health services for an initial term of up to 1 year, with up to 4 option years and up to an additional 6 months, resulting in an estimated annual cost of $27.9 million. This includes contracts for housing support services, homeless outreach workers, and case management services, as well as other key areas. Recommendation number 2 authorizes the amendment and extension of 54 existing behavioral health contracts across 9 distinct service areas, including, among others, outpatient mental health and substance use services, and prevention services. The current contracts in these areas are set to expire by the end of the fiscal year, and we're requesting authority to amend and extend them in order to ensure service continuity and to allow for future planning. This action authorizes extensions of these contracts up to June 30th, 2022, and up to an additional 6 months, resulting in an estimated annual cost of $104.2 million. Recommendation number 3 requests authorization to amend and extend 27 existing single-source contracts, including contracts for inpatient, psychiatric, and residential care. These have been issued to providers that are uniquely qualified to deliver particular services. The majority of the current contracts will expire at the end of the fiscal year, and we're requesting authority to amend and extend them again in order to ensure continuity and to provide us additional time to ensure future investments reflect the best response to the actual distribution of need. This action will result in an estimated annual cost of $46.1 million. As you know, our hospital systems are currently under immense strain due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Recommendations 4 and 5 will expand Augmented Services Programs, or ASP, capacity to help alleviate the COVID-19 surge in our local hospitals by creating additional availability of community-based places to which patients may be discharged. ASPs provide services to individuals with serious mental illness in licensed residential care facilities, also referred to as board and care facilities, to help them maintain or improve functioning in the community and to prevent institutionalization. Recommendation number 4 authorizes a request for statement of qualifications and awards contracts for such ASPs, resulting in an estimated annual cost of $1.8 million. Recommendation number 5, A and B, authorizes the expansion of ASP capacity through 2 actions, including the execution of single-source contracts and amendments of existing ASP contracts. These actions will result in an estimated annual cost of $2.9 million. Finally, recommendations number 6 and 7 will authorize agreements with the state which support the continuation of our work to advance the behavioral health continuum of care. Recommendation number 6 authorizes the execution of the cooperative agreement with the State Department of Rehabilitation for fiscal years 21-22 through 23-24 to provide vocational services for adults experiencing serious mental illness and support them in achieving placement in competitive employment. The current annual county cost for this program is around $241,000, which enables a revenue match that leverages state funding of $1.13 million. Recommendation number 7 authorizes the ratification of the performance contract agreement with the State Department of Healthcare Services, an agreement in which undergirds BHS's role as the Medi-Cal payer or provider for those with serious mental illness and substance use disorder in San Diego County. It establishes the county's responsibility to provide an integrated and coordinated range of public mental health services and will result in no estimated costs. Thank you, and I'll take any questions now.
Thank you, Dr. Bergman. Obviously, we spent a lot of time over the last 2 years really building out a better way to deliver behavioral health. Significant investments has been made. And I think in light of all of those changes and everything that we're trying to put together in a very comprehensive way along the continuum of care, I think this is an appropriate step to continue the operation of what we have while we continue to build out and look at the long-term picture. So I'm happy to make a motion to approve this item. We'll go next to, let me ask any of my, actually, let me ask the clerk if we have any requests for public comment first. I don't believe we do, but let's check.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. We do have requests to speak on this item. I note for the record that we received 1 e-comment and there were 6 individuals that requested to speak on this item. We'll be calling speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number. They will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. Callers will then need to press *6 to unmute your phone. Each caller will be asked to state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. You'll hear this sound when your time is up, so please conclude your comments at that time. Aaron, if you could please identify the first caller.
Yes, our first caller is 1605. 1605.
Hi, my name is Mustafa Zahid with Somali Family Service. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I would like to thank the board for this opportunity to speak on behalf of this issue. I'm with Somali Family Service of San Diego. We've been serving the local community for the last 20 years, and I just wanted to call in today in favor of item 11. We've definitely noticed a lack of cultural competency when it comes to certain programs, and we've noticed the need for different kinds of services in our community in regards to substance abuse and mental health disorders, as well as general behavioral health. So we wanted to call in today to call in favor of this item, and with that, I'll yield the rest of my time, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 4725. 4725.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hi, I am Arwa Al-Khawaja, and I'm calling here on behalf of Rihla, which is mental health services and life coaching. First, I want to say I'm here also in favor for this motion, like 11. And I want to tell you, like, I have worked here in the community for more than 20 years as a teacher. And then I dealt with the Muslim community specifically. I saw the problems that they go through. And personally, I have lost students due to mental health problems or drug abuse. Like some of them, one of them had just turned 18 and he just found dead in the downtown. So mentioning that if this have been dealt with the right way and then the right services were provided to them, then we could have prevented this from happening as much as we can, of course. So the Muslim community in general is like any other community who deals with mental health issues, with drug abuse, with domestic violence, any other problems. But in addition to dealing with the stigma and breaking the barriers of seeking help for mental health, there is another barrier, which is the cultural background. So a lot of us, the Muslim community, do not report, do not seek help because they feel at the end there's a cultural barrier. So I urge you here to support organizations who provide mental health and even drug abuse, treatment, and the other services for this community, where they can serve them based on their cultural needs and also professionally. to prevent this from happening, and at the same time to make sure that everyone here is safe and they receive the treatment that they deserve like any other human. Who knows what that student who have died, like the brilliant student, what he could have contributed to the community if we just provided the right help to him. So I urge you to support those organizations who provide this mental health, drug abuse treatment, other services to the communities that can understand this culture and serve the community. And thank you, Chair Fletcher and everyone for opening this to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 9174. 9174.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Summick. I'm calling from the Hospital Association of San Diego and Imperial Counties. We really appreciate this opportunity to speak with Chair Fletcher and the board to express our support on behalf of our hospitals and health systems for this item. We greatly appreciate the County of San Diego's Behavioral Health Services leadership and responsiveness to create additional step-down beds to help decompress hospitals. By adding 100 additional augmented service program slots at local board and cares, behavioral health long-term care providers and hospitals will be able to transition patients who've been waiting for placement to lower levels of care in the community. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted patient movement in the County of San Diego's behavioral health services continuum of care. All behavioral health providers have faced operational challenges with insufficient staffing, implementing infection control practices, and accessing sufficient supplies, including testing and now vaccinations. While hospitals have navigated surges of COVID-19 patients and increased ED volumes, our behavioral health community partners have struggled with COVID-19 outbreaks among residents and staff, and this has often led to lengthy times when admissions to these facilities have had to be closed. Despite these challenges, we all remain committed, along with the county, to strive to ensure people can access the care they need at the right place and at the right time. We value the ongoing partnership and collaboration between the county, the hospitals, and our behavioral health community partners to strategize on steps we can take to address our common challenges arising from the pandemic. We greatly appreciate the County of San Diego's continued commitment to maintaining continuity of essential mental health and substance use disorder services for our most vulnerable community residents. Thank you so much for your time and consideration of this item.
Thank you. Our next speaker is 0180. 0180. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. If we don't hear from you, we will come back to you. Our next speaker is 7337. 7337.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher and the board. My name is Guled Mahmoud. I'm calling. I want to comment on the need for cultural competency and providers that are able to meet the needs of diverse communities. I think that's been one of the issues in San Diego County. We have a lot of people in the, especially in the Islamic and East African community who haven't been able to access services or access services that with providers that understand their needs and their cultural backgrounds and the nuances that come along with that. Is there any way where we can connect with the county staff that are putting out the RFPs to kind of discuss with them the criteria of kind of what we need for as far as behavioral health services in our communities?
So hi, this is Luke Bergman, Director of Behavioral Health Services. Thank you for calling in. There certainly are opportunities to engage with staff within the Department of Procurements and Contracts, which can be a valuable resource. And there is, of course, every opportunity to reach out to me within Behavioral Health Services and to my staff to talk about behavioral health needs across the community.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And our final request to speak on this item was from 0180. So 0180.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll start my timer here. Good afternoon, Chairman Fletcher and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Adrian Kwiatkowski, and I'm speaking today on behalf of our local Islamic and Horn of Africa communities. You heard some of them speak already earlier in this conversation. I am asking for your help today. Like most communities, our local Islamic and Horn of Africa communities have challenges with substance abuse and mental health issues, and seeking treatment can be difficult because of long-standing cultural or religious stigmas. In order to adequately address these problems, we need local service providers that are sensitive to and from that community. I ask that you work with the local Islamic and Horn of Africa community to develop programs to serve their populations. Our county has an obligation to provide culturally sensitive substance abuse and mental health programs. I will be following up with each of your offices on our request. Thank you for your time and your consideration today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And that concludes public testimony on this item. Chair Fletcher.
Thank you very, very much. We'll now go to board deliberation. We have a motion for approval of this item on the table. I see Supervisor Lawson-Remer and then Supervisor Desmond. We'll start with Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you very much. So I just first want to thank the work of Dr. Luke Bergman in bringing this forward. In the past, these contracts would be renewable for up to 5 years, and the action before us today is just a 1-year extension. I would like to thank staff for taking this approach as it is consistent with the new evidence-based policy direction proposed by Chair Fletcher and myself that this board adopted 2 weeks ago. A shorter 1-year extension to these contracts will ensure that our fiscal subcommittee has time to create a policy that puts all future financial actions through a filter of cost-benefit analysis, data, and evidence. And I look forward to seeing these and other contracts reviewed in coming years through that lens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this, I know this is a very large item with a lot of contracts. However, it's less than a third of the behavioral health services budget, and it is only a 1-year extension. And as you know, these services are critical to our county's obligation to provide behavioral health services, and these contracts represent a bedrock of the behavioral health resources, from inpatient psychiatric care to community-based peer support. This action will allow staff to keep our system afloat. County's residents most in need, while our tax revenue-driven budgets become more clear through the pandemic here, and while our staff builds the integral internal capacity to address questions of value and equity as rigorously as possible. So I'd like to urge my colleagues to support this item in moving it forward and keeping the county and our behavioral health systems and services solvent for at least another year so they can count on those monies and services.
That sounds like a second, Supervisor Desmond.
It sure did. Okay, I'll second it.
We have a motion by myself, a second by Supervisor Desmond to approve the recommendations in agenda item 11. Are there any other board member comments? All right, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
All right, we'll now move to agenda item 14, the 2021 legislative program revision. Obviously, we took action on this to get this process moving at our first board meeting. I want to thank our staff for working feverishly to bring back something for our consideration this quickly. Again, the legislative program is a living, breathing document. All right, we try to outline some kind of core areas, some specific things that we want to focus on. But as we progress through the year, it's entirely appropriate the board bring forward individual pieces of legislation or individual topics or items that we might want to debate and discuss if we want to take a specific position on. But I think getting this adopted will provide the necessary guidance and direction to our legislative and intergovernmental teams moving forward. So with that, I would like to turn it over to staff for a presentation on this item. Then we'll hear from the public and then board deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me introduce Caroline Smith, who will be giving the presentation today. Some of you may not know Caroline. She's been in this role now for about a year, and she's doing a wonderful job. She is our Director of Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs. Caroline?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Fletcher and members of the board. This item is a report back for approval of the revised 2021 legislative program and additional related actions as directed by your board in item 12 brought forth by Chair Fletcher on January 12th. I'll provide a brief overview of the history of the legislative program for your board's reference, highlight the proposed changes for your consideration of the county's 2021 legislative program and the Board of Supervisors Policy Manual Section M, also referred to as the M policies. Board of Supervisors Policy M2 gives the Office of Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs, or OSIA, the authority to advocate on behalf of the county on policy and non-policy issues, as well as pending legislation. In order to speak with one voice on behalf of the county, OSIA issues the formal county positions, coordinates any testimony by county staff before decision-making bodies, and serves as the point of contact for communicating with your offices on all of those matters. Approval of the legislative program provides OSIA with policy guidance for the county's advocacy when evaluating legislative proposals out of Sacramento and Washington, D.C. for potential fiscal or operational impacts to the county. With your approval of the legislative program, OSIA has the authorization to take positions on behalf of the county based on the direction given in these documents to be able to quickly and effectively engage on legislation and policy in the county's best interests. Supervisors can also bring forward board letters with recommendations for legislative action and additions to the legislative program throughout the year. The legislative program has three components: the sponsorship proposals, the priority issues, and the policy guidelines. The sponsorship proposals outline which measures the county will pursue as a bill sponsor. The board's priority issues highlight the areas for advocacy at the state and federal level that the board has deemed most important for the year. And the policy guidelines provide general policy direction via guideline statements that allow us to react to proposals that may be introduced by other entities, organizations, or legislators during the year. Additionally, the M policies are a section in the Board of Supervisors Policy Manual that pertains specifically to legislative matters. OSIA works closely with county departments to gather their feedback on the items included in the legislative program. We rely heavily on our departmental subject matter experts to help inform the legislative program. For example, some of our very best sponsorship proposals have come from county staff who identified a state law as a barrier to providing excellent customer service and suggested a remedy to that barrier. Every day during the legislative session, OSIA reviews all of the bills that have been introduced and amended and determines which county subject matter experts need to review and provide our office with technical feedback. A referral is sent to those departments. Once the referral comes back, the OSIA Legislative Policy Advisor assigned to that area analyzes the department's feedback, asks any follow-up questions, surveys the policy landscape around that proposal, and checks if we have existing board authority to advocate. When the path for advocacy is decided, OSIA notifies the Board of Supervisors and the county's contracted advocates of the position the county is taking. The county's advocates then express the county's position in either Sacramento or Washington, D.C. as the bill moves through the legislative process. This can be by providing testimony, letters, direct contact makers with decisions, or with their staff. OSIA monitors the bills and manages the county's position throughout the entire legislative process. If there is a piece of legislation that might be of interest to your board, however, the legislative program lacks current authority to advocate on it, or we have conflicting authority within the legislative program, OSIA will prepare a legislation of interest memo and forward that bill directly to your board offices for consideration. In the past, this process has been practice and not policy, and this is part of the proposed addition to Board Policy M2 I will touch on in just a little bit. On January 12th, your board directed staff to suspend the 2021 legislative priority issues and guidelines previously approved on October 27th, 2020, and report back with abbreviated guiding principles, specifically define legislative priorities, and to recalibrate our advocacy to be more nimble and effective. In addition, prior to the board's January action, staff and OSIA had conducted an internal analysis of the utilization of the county's legislative program for the last 5 years and reviewed the legislative programs of other counties in California, as well as other local municipalities. What we found in that analysis is that in the last 5 years, the county has utilized 90 unique statements to take positions on 131 bills. In the 2020 legislative program, including the M policies, there were a total of 1,596 statements. What this told us is that there were clearly too many statements and that most were not useful to our operations. In our review of other legislative programs, the use of broad statements that succinctly and clearly relayed the intent provided a much better platform than dozens of statements per subject. Combining this analysis with your board's clear delineation of priorities on January 12th, the documents previously approved on October 27th were revised in the following ways. In the priority issues, instead of each priority section being accompanied by statements authorizing specific advocacy in the topic area, the document now has 2 overarching action statements. The County of San Diego will actively engage on legislation in the following areas at the state and federal level to ensure such legislation benefits county operations and the clients, customers, and constituents we serve. And the County of San Diego will actively pursue all available funding to lift up and invest in our communities to ensure the San Diego region receives its fair share. The priority section has been taken down from 49 pages to 5. The guidelines was given a set of guiding principles at the direction of your board, and on the first page of the section, it provides the lens by which we will advocate. Bills in any subject matter area should adhere to these guiding principles. This includes equality and racial justice, equity in all programs and services, advocating for financial resources to administer programs, etc. The guidelines themselves were also streamlined to the broad statements I mentioned earlier. We also have switched out some very key adjectives. In addition to just support and oppose, which allow our office to engage in introduced legislation, we added statements like engage, ensure, and pursue, which changed this document into one that is proactive in nature. This document went from 67 pages to 11 in this proposed version. Board Policy M1 establishes the creation and submission of sponsorship proposals. Minor revisions were made to this policy to add more inclusive and flexible language, as well as an additional paragraph that allows action on an item included in the priority issues or guiding principles. Earlier, I noted that Policy M2 gives OSIA the authority to advocate, and it also outlines the how. Revisions to this policy include the addition of communication processes to your board, such as the legislation of interest memo I mentioned, significant changes to the intent to be proactive and nimble in our advocacy efforts as opposed to simply reactive, and added the authority to act cooperatively with other regional municipalities and entities to influence legislation that impacts our entire region. The edits to Policy M2 provide OSIA and our contracted advocates the ability to sit at the table and influence policy and potential legislation before something problematic for the county is introduced. One notable way this can benefit the county is in the state budget process, which is very fluid and often changes before final trailer bills are written. Finally, the proposed revision regarding policies M3 through M61 is to permanently sunset them. They are focused on individual subject matters such as criminal gang activity, fraud prevention in public and medical assistance programs, and illegal immigration. These policies have several very limiting factors. First and foremost, there are many topics inconsistent with your board's January direction and priorities. Second, some of them were added as far back as the late 1970s and are no longer relevant. Third, they contain both redundant and conflicting statements to the legislative program. And finally, they're on a 7-year sunset review cycle, which doesn't keep up with the rapidly changing legislative landscape or provide your board with the opportunity to provide feedback on these topics often. Due to all of these factors, the relevant and useful statements contained in these M policies have proposed to be moved into the revised version of the legislative program before you today so that they are now part of the package reviewed by your board each year. With those proposed revisions, the recommendation for your consideration today are to approve the priority issues and guidelines documents as revised, permanently sunset board policies M3 through M61, and to approve the revisions to Board of Supervisors policy M1 and M2. In addition, per your January 12th recommendation, we will also be reporting back in 75 days with a proposed annual process for revising these documents on a regular basis that includes community feedback and input. Subject to your questions, this concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, for that presentation and very thorough walkthrough of what we're considering. Before we go to board member deliberations, let me ask the clerk if there's any request for public comment on this item.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. There are no requests to speak on this item. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get it started. I'll just put a motion on the table to adopt to begin discussion purposes. We'll go first to Vice Chair Vargas, then Supervisor Anderson, then Supervisor Lawson-Remer. Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for the thorough work done on this document as a policy, junkie. I really appreciate it. And I was thrilled to see that advocating for additional resources for the Tijuana River Valley was a priority and that we're doing it as a county was something that I really appreciated. I did want to make a friendly amendment that I propose that we add under the guidelines for public health the following. County will identify, prioritize, and advocate for sexual and reproductive health care funding programs and services that increase access in the region. That was, I, as someone who worked very closely with the county in the past, I know that there are many departments in the county that are directly impacted, their operations are directly impacted by reproductive health care. And so I would like to be able to add that as well.
All right, happy to add that. So we would add sexual reproductive health care services and programs. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, happy to accept that. Let's go next to Supervisor Anderson.
Do you need a second for the motion?
Yeah, Supervisor Vargas seconded it.
Oh, okay. When I was reading through it, do we include the federal government? Because I didn't remember seeing that.
We do, Supervisor Anderson. It is the state and federal and other entities. That's right there at the top.
Okay. The reason why I thought maybe we didn't include it is because I don't think I read that we included the surface transportation reauthorization. That's a huge omnibus on the federal level that would help us with our transportation.
So what we have, thanks to your input, Supervisor Anderson, we definitely have right there at the very top, actively pursue all available funding to lift up and invest in our communities, ensure San Diego region receives its fair share. I don't know that we specifically called out individual federal legislative efforts, but I think advocating for that certainly fits clearly within the framework of what's been in there, and my intent that would be included.
Oh, fantastic. I saw some called out, but this one not, and I think every omnibus that brings more money to San Diego County, we should be pursuing. Thank you very much.
Chair Fletcher, if I may, this is Caroline Smith. We do have one statement specific to the reauthorization of federal omnibus bills, including infrastructure, Farm Bill, SNAP, TANF, Older Americans Act, Endangered Species, and Ryan White.
Perfect.
But I don't think it included the surface transportation reauthorization. That's why I brought it up.
We could add, Supervisor Anderson, just in the readout there that was just shared in the commas, we could just add transportation.
Fantastic.
Okay, I have no problem with that, assuming the seconder of the motion does not either. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's go to Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you so much, Chair Fletcher. And first, I want to just echo the words of Vice Chair Vargas in thanking county staff for really excellent work on this. I know it was a massive effort, and I think a great job has been done in permanently sunsetting outdated policies and adopting a new framework that reflects the real needs of our county and the new direction of our board, and that centers issues like equity and justice and climate change and the environment. It's a new day, and I thank Chair Fletcher for his leadership in moving this forward. In that vein, I would like to offer a few rather specific friendly amendments. And I think if it's okay, I can just go section by section. So starting with climate change and the environment, I would strike, quote, appropriate vegetation management and habitat restoration, and replace that clause with, quote, habitat management and restoration. And Chair Fletcher, I can send these to you so you can read it back, so you don't need to be too furiously scribbling notes. Then secondly, under water quality, I would like to, at the end of the water quality section, append the following. quote, the county should also engage legislatively in reducing upstream risk to water quality, including the repair and improvement of stormwater infrastructure and the preservation and restoration of riparian habitat. And then at the end of habitat, append and increase the adoption of local native plants in public and private landscaping. Then moving to environmental justice and protection, add a clause that's to say the county will pursue efforts to mitigate and reverse the impacts of climate change on all communities with an urgent focus on low-income communities and communities of color that bear some of the greatest effects of climate change to ensure a healthy environment for all to live, learn, and work in. Moving to equity and justice would, in the last sentence of this section, instead of the County of San Diego will engage in legislation that protects the safety of those in our community, replace with the County of San Diego will engage in legislation that will strengthen community and law enforcement relationships and fund programs designed to enhance transparency and foster positive interactions with law enforcement. And then also add a clause to the county will support legislation that would increase access to legal counsel for immigrants and refugees. And then moving on finally to the homelessness and affordable housing section, I would just suggest that we disaggregate those sections, a homeless section and affordable housing section, because although those issues are related, the policy toolkits to advance them are not necessarily the same. So it would seem logical to disaggregate that agenda to speak more clearly to legislative priorities around homelessness and separately to legislative priorities around affordable and attainable housing. Thank you.
Okay.
Nathan, would you, sorry, Chair Fletcher, would you like me to send these to you so you could read them back? That'd be helpful.
If we get them, and then I have a couple additions, and then we'll kind of summarize all of them there.
Great, perfect.
I believe that the clerk of the board has those as well. The additions that I would like to make would be to propose the addition of additional sections supporting working families to the policy guidelines, which is attachment B, to emphasize another priority. This section would include the following: support legislation that promotes living wage jobs with good benefits, support legislations that protects the right of workers to organize, and support legislation that provides strong workplace safety standards. And so with that, I think we have a motion and a second to adopt the legislative plan as outlined with the following changes. One, pursuant to a recommendation from Supervisor Vargas, we would add sexual and reproductive health care services and programs. Pursuant to a request from Supervisor Anderson, in the litany of omnibus federal efforts we would add transportation in there with the other ones. Pursuant to Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer, and I believe the clerk of the board has these. Let me just restate these for you real quick. Under climate change and the environment, we will strike appropriate vegetation management and habitat restoration and replace with habitat management and restoration. In water quality, we would append the following to be: the county should also engage legislatively in reducing upstream risk to water quality, including the repair and improvement of stormwater infrastructure and the preservation and habitat of riparian habitat. Under habitat, at the end of habitat, we would append and increase the adoption of local native plants in public and private landscaping. In environmental justice, we would add, despite having contributed the least to climate change and pollution, the county will engage in legislation and pursue funding for efforts to mitigate and reverse the impacts of climate change on all communities, with an urgent focus on low-income communities and communities of color that bear some of the greatest effects of climate change. And then striking the sentence after that, striking the section, improve and maintain a clean and healthy environment that acknowledges the importance of environmental justice. We're just replacing the previous section for the latter section. In equity and justice, we will add the County of San Diego will engage in legislation that will strengthen community and law enforcement relationship and funding for programs designed to enhance transparency and foster positive interactions with law enforcement that will be additive to what is already in there. And we will add support legislation that would increase access to legal counsel for immigrants and refugees. Regarding equity and justice section, we will Add systemic racism and racial inequities have been ongoing and sustained over time, and the County of San Diego must recognize and act on these deep-seated problems. And then homeless and affordable housing, we will disaggregate those two policies, with homeless policies and housing policies being two separate sections. Those are the changes from Supervisor Lawson-Remer. And then the final set of changes, which I outlined, will be adding supporting working families to the policy guideline attachment B that says we will support legislation that promotes living wage jobs with good benefits, support legislation that protects the right for workers to organize, support legislation that provides strong workplace safety standards. With those changes, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments from board members? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
All right, we will move our final two agenda items. We will go to agenda item 15. I will ask the clerk to call forward this item and ask if there is a brief staff presentation on it.
Chairman Fletcher and members of the board, this item is being pulled in accordance with Government Code Section 53635.7, which states, in making any decision that involves borrowing in the amount of $100,000 or more, the legislative body of the local agency shall discuss, consider, and deliberate each decision as a separate item on the business agenda of its meeting. So to manage its cash flow needs, the county has historically issued annual tax and revenue anticipation notes, also known as TRANS, along with participating school districts. On July 7th of last year, the Board of Supervisors approved the first issuance of TRANS for the school districts. The county did not issue a TRANS. This year, unlike previous years, the school districts have the need to issue a second series of TRANS for fiscal year 2021 to address end of the year cash flow shortfalls associated with current economic conditions. The county will not issue a TRANS at this time, but in support, the county will coordinate the second TRANS on behalf of the school districts. The repayment of the notes will be the responsibility of the participating school districts. There are anticipated to be 14 participating school districts borrowing an aggregate amount not to exceed $231.3 million. I recommend approval for the county to execute the Series 2020B TRAN program on behalf of the local school districts, and subject to your questions, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that presentation. With that, I'll make a motion to approve this item. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by myself, second by Vice Chair Vargas. Any board member comments or questions, or ask the clerk any public requests to speak on this item?
There are no requests to speak on this item, Chair Fletcher.
I see no request to speak. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer?
Aye.
Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Our final agenda item today is agenda item 16, administrative item, second consideration and adoption of ordinance amendments to the compensation ordinance. I will ask if there's a brief staff presentation on this item.
Before the staff begins their presentation, we had one request to speak on this item. If that individual could dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since this is the second reading of the compensation ordinance, we do not have a staff presentation today. However, the Director of Human Resources, Susan Brazo, is here to answer any specific questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to our public speaker.
We are waiting for that speaker to dial into the conference line.
All right, we will give them another moment. All right, with that speaker not being present, I think we'll go ahead and vote on this item. If they call in before the conclusion of the meeting, we will of course hear their public comment. Is there a motion to approve agenda item 16?
So moved.
Motion by Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Vargas. Ask the clerk to check one more time if our public speaker has dialed in.
The speaker has not dialed in. Thank you.
All right, not hearing them, we have a motion by Supervisor Anderson, a second by Supervisor Vargas on agenda item 16. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson?
Aye.
Supervisor Lawson-Remer? Supervisor Lawson-Remer? Supervisor Desmond?
Aye.
Vice Chair Vargas?
Aye.
Chair Fletcher?
Fletcher, aye.
That motion passes with Supervisor Lawson-Remer absent, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.
All right, thank you. I believe that concludes our agenda items for today. I'll ask the clerk, I believe we have one additional public speaker who wishes to comment on closed session. Again, for our new board members, the public is allowed to call in and comment on closed session items. As supervisors, we do not respond or make comments on closed session items prior to them being heard, but would like to invite the clerk to ask our public speaker to speak at this time.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I'd ask the individual that requested to speak on item 20, which is closed session, to dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. Chair Fletcher, while we're waiting for that caller, if you would like, it would be appropriate to move to adjournments in memory before the board adjourns to closed session.
We will do that. We have one adjournment in memory. Call on Supervisor Desmond for a adjournment in memory of Fire Captain Chris Mertz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is an adjournment in memory of Fire Captain Chris Mertz. I'd like to adjourn today's meeting in memory of Fire Captain Chris Mertz, a 30-year veteran of the Rancho Santa Fe Fire Protection District. Chris passed away on January 20th, 2021. Chris had a distinguished career with the Santa Fe Fire Protection District. He was stationed at the Rancho Santa Fe Fire Station number 5 in Harmony Grove. He's also served with the Federal Fire Department, San Diego, and the United States Forest Service. During his time with the Forest Service, Chris served on the Laguna Hot Shots, an elite hand crew based out of Descanso Ranger District. Chris was still active as one of the original members as the San Diego Urban Search and Rescue Task Force 8. He was a responder to the World Trade Center attacks in 2001 and to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. He was an active member of the local International Association of Firefighters 4349. Chris is survived by his wife, Canley, and his son, Garrett, who was also a firefighter, like his father, with CAL FIRE in San Diego, and his two daughters, Natalie and Roxanne, both who are proudly serving our country in the United States Air Force. Our hearts grieve with his family and the firefighting community. Today, I express my gratitude for Chris's sacrifice and to place the public safety first and serving his fellow citizens as a priority and throughout his life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. The whole board joins in expressing our condolences to the Mertz family. I'll ask the clerk if our final public speaker has dialed in.
That individual has not dialed into the conference line.
All right. With that, we will adjourn into closed session and look forward to joining everyone tomorrow.
The board will now recess into closed session to consider those matters listed under item 20 on today's agenda. If there are any reportable actions, they will be reported out prior to the start of the planning and land use session of this meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, January 27th, 2021.